Okay. Okay, we're gonna start the Zoom meeting. I'm Fred Moore with the Northeast Philadelphia History Network and the Friends of Northeast Philadelphia History. I'm gonna have Janine Pollock, one of the board members of the Friends of Northeast Philadelphia History, introduce Margery Sly. She knows Margery, has for years. And so I'll let Janine do that now, and I'll just keep admitting people. All right, Janine?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Fred. And thank you, everyone who is here on the call, and those of you who braved it to Pennypack Baptist, even though we are mostly on Zoom tonight. But welcome to our Women's History Month talk, which I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, who Margery Sly, who I've known for many years as a colleague in the special collections community in Philadelphia. And this project that Margery is going to talk about is comes about through in the 90s and early 2000s. There was sort of a panic of all these collections are languishing in libraries all over the world, and they haven't been cataloged. They haven't been there's no way to find out what's in them, and so money became available to do these large projects. The Council of Library and Information Resources had this whole finding hidden collections grants where PACSCOL, the Philadelphia Area Consortium of Special Collections Libraries, was able to survey collections in the Philadelphia area and really uncover like a trove of collections, and so many collections that had lots of intertwined themes, and lots of collections there was a lot of synchronicity to the collections. And one of the areas, and then we started to write grants for in the PACSCOL. The consortium would write grants for subject matter like medieval manuscripts, which that was a big project in Philadelphia. And this project in her own right had to do with all of the resources that were available that had to do with women's fight for equality, fight for the vote. And it's, not every single institution in Philadelphia has that kind of those types of collections, but there were enough that they were able to bring them together. And Margery was one of the, if not the driving force behind that. So marshaling the finding aids that we were able to create through these grants, uncovering hidden collections, and to putting them in the context of what types of collections there were, and telling stories of these important historical events. So Margery served as the director of special collections at Temple University Libraries, retired a couple of years ago. She was at the helm when they opened the new Charles Library with the beautiful special collections facility. So that was that happened under her watch, and it's a wonderful facility that she got to open. Margery is a graduate of Dickinson College and has a BA in History and German Literature. She also holds a Master of Arts in History and a Master of Science in Library Sciences with an archival administrative emphasis. from Case Western University. And Margery is like not only a library administrator, but an archivist who knows her way around a finding aid. And so she's a certified archivist and a fellow of the Society of American Archivists. And she is also serves with me on the board of the Philobiblon Club, a club for bibliophiles in Philadelphia, and has been a great friend. And I'm so privileged that I get to work with her continued, even though she's retired. So, ladies and gentlemen, Margery Sly.
Thank you so much for that gracious introduction. Yes, I've flunked retirement. What can I say? It's great to be with you for a Women's History Month program. I'm grateful we don't have to travel in this weather, but sorry not to meet a lot of you in person. Tonight, I'm here to talk about the In Her Own Right project, a century of women's activism, 1820 to 1920. Janine has introduced you to the Philadelphia Area Consortium of Special Collections Libraries and its unlovely acronym, PACSCL. It's a consortium of currently 35 rare book and manuscript libraries and archives in the greater Philadelphia area. We started talking about what the next big grant project was going to be probably in the early 2000s. PACSCL is able to leverage the skills of its many members to do multi-institutional projects and to write big grants that small institutions wouldn't be able to do on their own. And so this was one of those. Some one of us glanced up and realized that the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which happened in August 1920, was several years away, and we began to think about how we could gather resources that would help students and scholars learn more about the century leading up to that vote. We firmly believed that women's suffrage, the fight for the vote for women didn't just rise out of nowhere, that women were working in many realms and spheres for their own rights and the rights of others for much longer. So this talk may be a little unusual for you. I'm going to talk both about the resource and but I'm also going to tell you some stories about some of the history that we uncovered along the way. You may, collaborative is probably pretty clear. So we gathered eventually 24 institutions to digitize content from their collections. Aggregation or aggregator might be a little less clear. Some of you probably are familiar with the Digital Public Library of America that brings together digitized images and documents from institutions all over the country. In our case, our aggregator brings together women's history materials from 24 institutions. So yes, this was the project to digitize the content. I wanted to hit a few highlights before we move on. We had a concept that we wanted to digitize as much content as possible, and that's where the wholesale idea comes in, that we would digitize as much as we could find, describe it with good metadata, and let scholars and students loose to do whatever they wanted with it. But we also understood that not all of our users were going to be faculty and graduate students. So we wanted to make the content accessible for elementary school and high school students and undergraduates as well. So that's where the retail piece comes in. We decided to build a lot of context through exhibits and blog posts and programming that would pull together content that we had found and help individuals learn about that. We had an advisory board of women history scholars. We hired a surveyor to roam many of the institutions to see what they had, and also to find out if they were willing to involve themselves in a big digitization project. We had a volunteer standards procedures committee with members from institutions all over the region. We did user testing, and then COVID happened. I probably should have put COVID on the highlight list, but I don't view it as a highlight. We converted to Zoom metadata enhancement and transcription events where for some cookies and pizza, librarians and archivists from all over the region got together and improved the metadata and did transcription of a lot of the cursive documents. COVID was a speed bump. It meant that we weren't necessarily able to include all the institutions we wanted to because a lot of them were closed. It pushed our deadline past the 2020 anniversary. The granting agencies were very gracious about that. But we powered through and wrapped up the project pretty much in a timely fashion. We did this by getting 5 different grants, and I'm not going to bore you with that, except to say thank you to the National Endowment for the Humanities, to the Council of Library and Information Resources, to the Gladys Kriebel Delmas Foundation, to the New Century Trust, and again to NEH. So we received over $500,000 to work on this project. In addition, PAC Schools supported it, and we had countless hours of volunteer time. The URL is at the top of this slide, inherownright.org, and there's a variety of content behind all those thumbnails. And I will be talking about a lot of it in a minute. Sort of hard to capture the whole web page, but here you go. So the first thing we wanted to do was to enable our users to search all the individual documents that we had digitized. I just searched on Byberry for fun to see what we had, and came up with Martha Schofield's essay on nature, which she wrote while she was a student at Byberry Friends School. This is the metadata, so the cataloging record, so the date the essay was written, who wrote it, a little bit of information about it, some subject headings, and all that other information. This particular essay is at Swarthmore College in the Friends Historical Library. I just proudly said that we had a standards team and a metadata enhancement events, and we had a metadata specialist, and we did our best to get everybody on the same page with metadata, but Fred and I found that it was challenging to get all institutions on the same page. He and I were just looking for an illustration for the announcement for this program, and it was harder to find than you might think. The piece that's that really gets at the aggregation, you'll see here in the middle of the screen, view full item, and a link that sends you out to the Tri-College Library's digital site. The whole purpose behind the aggregator is not to replicate the entire document, but just to have that thumbnail and then this link, which sends you to the full document, which is housed on the site of the library that actually owns the original. So that's an extra step, but it gets you out to the content where it actually lives, and often with a little more data. Janine also talked about finding aids. One of the other things we did was put up collection guides for most of the collections out of which we took content. So this is the description of the entire Martha Schofield paper collection at Swarthmore. Tiny, tiny print, I know, but just so you get the idea. And we gathered collection descriptions from all the institutions listed on the screen and several more. So that's a really good place to start sometimes if you want to get an overview of what's on the site, is these higher level collection descriptions. And then, as I said, we really felt like we needed to provide context for users who might not be as familiar with women's history, with archives, with this kind of research. Our surveyor and essayist was Christina Larocco, who's a PhD in women's history. And she starts this essay in a great way. In the Broadway musical Hamilton, Angelica Schuyler demands that Thomas Jefferson include women in the sequel to the Declaration of Independence. While there is no evidence that Schuyler herself made this claim, American women of all races and classes have attempted to claim larger roles for themselves since the nation's founding. This site charts the way in which Philadelphia area women, and I'll add many other women from other parts of the country, did so between 1820 and 1920, the century leading up to the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So you've always got to get that Hamilton reference in there. So these contextualizing essays are really a good starting point for folks who want to get an overview. Then we did exhibits, and I'll be drawing on some of these for when I tell you some stories about our women in our organizations. Their blog posts, they include images from the collections and help contextualize them. So they tell the story of a particular instance or event that really helps serve as a great entry point to the content. And we did the same kind of thing by putting up biographical sketches of some of the women who we discovered or uncovered as we worked through all the digitized content. I wanted to take a side trip into one blog post that a graduate student wrote for us. We recruited a lot of grad students to write these for us. And he entitled it Lucretia Mott, 19th Century Foodie, and said, in 1849, while traveling through New York, Mott attended a dinner party at the home of abolitionist and politician Gerrit Smith, where she was served boiled ham, barbecued chicken, boiled macaroni, potatoes, salad, coconut pudding, strawberries and cream, tea, and bread and butter. A few days after this event, she supped at the home of her daughter, Ann Mott Hopper, and was served lamb, string beans, squash, new potatoes, peas, raspberries, stewed blackberries, and milk. So Lucretia Mott, the suffragist, kept a very extensive diary that included very extensive food updates. And so if you wanted to know what people were eating in the mid-1800s, read Lucretia Mott's diary. This is one of our only in-person metadata enhancement event. Lots of faithful folks who were transcribing and trying to make the metadata sing a little bit more. Also on the site is some digital scholarship tools. This is a tool called InfoViz, and you have to go to the site and play with it. So you click, In Her Own Right is in the middle, and then you click on one of the subjects and you go out to all the topics that build off of relationships and family. So children, death, love and friendship, families. So this, and then on the right side, you can see all the collections and subject headings that will take you to that content. I'm trying to illustrate that even though this is very much about women working for their rights and the rights of others, it also includes a lot of content around topics such as the family here, or food, or whatever. So there are many entry points and many subjects you could research using this content. I won't bore you too much with the data, but one of the other things we really hoped people would do would be to download the data sets and manipulate it, and build other connections across the collections that we digitized. One of the great things about the project is the connections we found, where one person's collection was mostly at one archives, but then there was a little bit more somewhere else, and all this could be brought together virtually through the data. Something else that we were really committed to was to build resources for teachers. And so we have a page that has tips for using the site, but also several primary source sets. So a primary source set is written for a particular grade level or set of grade levels. This particular one is 9 through 12. It references the state standards that it meets in Pennsylvania. It includes discussion questions and exercises, and then generally about 10 to 12 individual sources that enable the students to interact with primary sources without being overwhelmed by hundreds of documents. So this primary source set is about Martha Schofield, much later in life, after she'd written that Nature essay. One of the sources is a brief biographical sketch of her, with an emphasis on her work as an educator of African Americans. And just to read a brief excerpt, Martha's mother and father were members of this very meeting, Newtown Wakefield monthly meeting. When Martha was 10 years old, one of the most critical questions in the history of the United States was stirring in the hearts of the people. Even a little child could feel the volcanic friction which slavery questions were causing. So this is an interesting brief biographical sketch that goes along with 11 other documents about Schofield that teachers can use as an educational tool, and as a way to do local history, Pennsylvania history, Civil War history, and based on state standards, while we hope really turning students on to primary sources, which we all think are wonderful. One of the great things about this biographical sketch is that it's typed, because we recognize that the reading of cursive has become more of a challenge for school children. So this has that advantage as well. One of the final things we did was a 2-day symposium, pulling together speakers on many of the subjects that we highlighted in the collections, much of the content that we digitized. And all those programs are available on the Pack School YouTube channel. I can strongly recommend Martha Jones' plenary keynote address, but there's something for everybody there. And again, that's another educational resource which we we hope people are using. So I'm going to pause here. I don't know how we, well, maybe I won't. I was thinking folks might have questions at this point before I launch into the stories, but maybe I'll just ask everyone to save their questions until the end. So that was a lot of technical stuff and a lot about the content of the site. And I'll leave you to explore that. But now I wanted to do part B, which is really some of the stories that we uncovered as we began to digitize content from archives all over the region, and actually as far south as Washington, D.C. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was Helen Parrish's diaries that are found in the Octavia Hill Association records at Temple. I'll admit it's one that's close to my heart. The Octavia Hill Association was incorporated in 1896 to improve working class housing conditions through the management of dwellings, which it purchased and renovated. It was modeled after the work in London of Octavia Hill, which Helen Parrish had studied. Parrish served as the secretary for the association. She kept these diaries in 1888, and she wrote a lot of publications and other things describing the association's work, which we also digitized. But this 3-volume set of diaries describes what she called her, quote, friendly visits to the Octavia Hills Association's tenants. And in common with other social welfare activists of the era, Parrish and other staff members believed that part of their role was to police tenants' behavior. So you've heard of the worthy poor. These were the folks worthy of housing. And Helen's diaries are quite frank about expressing her opinion about the residents of the Octavia Hills housing stock and also who might be worthy to live there. So I think one of the reasons I like this so much, although I don't like Helen very much, is that we really tried to capture the wide range of women, sort of warts and all, and all of whom were working, they felt, in a direction to support women and become active members of the society themselves. So you don't have to like Helen to recognize that this is an important piece of women's history and an important way that women moved towards getting the vote eventually in 1920. I mentioned earlier Lucretia Mott's diary. So many of you probably know that she was a prominent Philadelphia Quaker and a leader in reform movements, especially anti-slavery, education, peace, and women's rights. She was one of the founders of the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, and she led a delegation of women to the 1840 World Anti-Slavery Convention held in London. This particular diary she kept to document her experiences in London when she and other female delegates were refused participation because of their sex. So that's a very serious piece of women's history, women's suffrage history. But as I mentioned earlier, her diary also records all those fascinating menu details. We really wanted to be as representative of women as we possibly could, and had long known about 3 friendship albums at the Library Company of Philadelphia, created kept by African American women. These were members of Philadelphia's free Black elite, and they sent these around to friends as far away as Boston to write poetry in, to put illustrations in. So as you can tell, the illustrations are beautiful, the little hand-colored watercolors. As I said, it is the free Black elite. So it's that very close social network in the Northeast that these document. A side note, one of the issues we struggled with was how to document women who could not write, did not leave a documentary record. And I'll show you a few collections in a bit that sort of helps us get at that indirectly. We also were aware that there was a fourth album at the Moreland Spingarn Center at Howard University, and they were able to digitize that for us during COVID. And so we have a link out to that content as well. So we've brought those albums together virtually. One of the significant figures in some of these friendship albums was Sarah Mapps Douglas. This butterfly image she drew, and it's a token of love from me to thee. It's in Amy Matilda Cassie's album, 1833 to 1856, again, also at the Library Company. Douglas, who was born in 1806 and died in 1882, was a teacher, an anti-slavery activist, a writer, an artist, and again, a prominent member of the Philadelphia African American elite community. She was active in the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, which was an interracial abolitionist group. That was somewhat unusual. We wanted to document conversations across race and class, but white women and Black women did not always operate in the same sphere, even though they were working towards the same goals. Douglas was an important exception to that. We also were able to digitize letters from Douglas to her friend Rebecca White that are at the Haverford College Quaker collection. And White was white. And these two women carried on correspondence about various anti-slavery issues, which is a really significant piece of content. And we were able to unite all this material on the site so that people could read it and use it without traveling to all the different archives. At the Bates History of Nursing collection at UPenn, they have the Mercy Douglas Hospital and School of Nursing archives. That was Philadelphia's first Black hospital and nurse training school. The collection is an extensive amount of student records that document the demographics of these Black nursing students, including age, education, and religion. The files also include letters from applicants, their reference letters, what subjects they needed to learn, and information about the qualities associated with a successful nurse. It's a really rich source of individual studies, but also demographic data about African American students in that era. This is Mildred Ellis, and on the left there is a letter of reference that her minister wrote for her to help her get admitted to the school. And this is Lillian B. Welch. This is her application in her student file. This was the form that all the applicants filled out, and students were required to be well-educated, of good moral character, neat, clean, of pleasing appearance, obedient and assertive. And they went through nursing school, which enabled them to earn a living and really control somewhat the course of their lives, and play a role of some significance in their communities. So I'm skipping around on the chronology. We're going back in time. This is just an example of Deborah Logan Norris's diaries. She was born in 1761 to another prominent Quaker family, and she recorded in her diary, how can that be true? I copied this. I don't know. Was she at the first reading of the Declaration of Independence? Hard to know. Her diaries go from 1815 to 1839, so maybe she was reporting on someone else's presence at the Declaration reading. She wrote extensively in her journal, you can see, and to my eye has really great readable cursive handwriting, which might not be the case for other people who can't read cursive. But she worked hard to sort of construct her own identity and talk about her interests and her opinions. Again, this is what survives the record book of an elite woman who may not have been totally representative of women of that era, but it's what we've got. Moving back to Temple, we have the archives of the Pennsylvania Society to Protect Children from Cruelty there. And we digitized all their annual reports. The society was organized in November of 1876, the 8th such group in the United States. The first objective they worked on was to secure passage of a state law allowing for active prosecution in cases of child abuse. They worked for over a year on that. And they then had two alternatives in proven cases of child abuse, either disciplining the parents and returning the child to their care, or placing the child in a foster home. And there were various homes in the city that were used for temporary placement of children. And gradually, these case records became more and more extensive as society's agents conducted more detailed investigations of the cases. So the case files are quite extensive and quite fascinating and quite harrowing. So it's an insight into the lives of the mothers of these children, the lives of the female children and their brothers, the conditions that they lived in Philadelphia from the 1870s onwards, and a very rich source of social history around all those topics. We've had classes from both UPenn's School for Social Work and Temple School for Social Work use these case files for their coursework. So again, skipping around, this is Dora Lewis. She looks like such a sweet little lady. She was a prominent Philadelphian and a central figure of the suffrage movement, born in 1862. She married Lawrence Lewis, but was widowed in 1890, and she used her position in society to be very active in women's rights and the American labor movement. She was a member of the first executive committee of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which was chaired by Alice Paul, right across the river in New Jersey. We digitized some Paul content as well. And Lewis was one of the first women Paul asked to join her in breaking with the Suffrage Association in 1916 to form the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage, which was later known as the National Women's Party. And that group became more radically active for women's suffrage. They, I think, were tired of waiting. Dora participated and led many active and radical demonstrations and published newspapers and all that kind of thing in support of women's suffrage. She was also very involved in the National Women's Party's campaign of civil disobedience. And this is a photo of the Silent Sentinels, a rotating group of picketers clad very, like nice ladies with their placards. And they did a continuous vigil in front of the White House for 2 years. This photo shows President Woodrow Wilson and a Secret Service man getting their morning salute. This photo happens to be in the Caroline Katzenstein papers, which are at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. She was active in Synagogue Rodef Shalom in Philadelphia, and also very active in the National Women's Party. Dora was arrested multiple times during public demonstrations. She was arrested in Lafayette Park across from the White House, trying to give a speech at a demonstration. Probably the most infamous occurrence of suffragist imprisonment occurred on November 14th, 1917 at the Occoquan Workhouse in Virginia. Dora arrived at the prison, spoke up for the group, requested they receive political prisoner status, which they did not, which was denied by the superintendent. And that evening, 33 women, including Dora, were brutalized by guards at the workhouse and force-fed if they were participating in hunger strikes. That night, before she was attacked by the guards, which is referred to as the Night of Terror, she wrote this letter to her mother, which we've digitized. And as all daughters do with their mothers, she wrote a very optimistic update on her time at the workhouse, even though they could only write once per week. So I think many of us can picture us writing a reassuring letter to our mother from jail. I don't know how her mother found out about the succeeding Night of Terror activities. And I wanted to end with another really early collection that intersects with the Jewish American population here in the region. Rebecca Gratz, born in 1781, was a Jewish American educator and philanthropist. She was a member of the Gratz family who settled in the U.S. before the Revolutionary War. In 1838, she worked with the Female Hebrew Benevolent Society to found a Sunday school in Philadelphia that was open to all Jewish children, regardless of gender, parental financial standing, or synagogue affiliation. The Female Hebrew Benevolence Society was founded in 1819, and it was the first Jewish charitable organization in Philadelphia, and the first organization in the U.S. to offer free basic Jewish religious education. So we've digitized their minute books, their publications, Gratz's letters to her colleagues and friends, and as with all the content on the website, it gets at how early the work of women working for others' rights began and how many different directions it could take you in. So I think I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to answer questions. I'll just reiterate that, as you can tell, there are so many stories, topics, entry points, and abilities for different users to use different content, that we really hope this resource will continue to be a rich one for many years to come. We continue to sustain it despite the lack of grant money.
Okay, thank you. Getting some echo here, hold it. All right. We have to put up with it. Jack McCarthy had some. Hold on. Well, not sure how to do this. We gotta turn that.
I'll just ask the question myself, Fred, while you figure that out.
Sure. I see you in the chat there, Jack.
Yeah. So, well, then, so yeah, who maintains the website? Is it updated at all? And then any really sort of standout collections that you really wanted to include, but you just ran out of time and money?
So there's a team of us who still meets quarterly. It's me, Margaret Graham at the Legacy Center, Drexel College of Medicine, Celia Costello-Ogan from Friends Historical Library, Lindsay Van Tyne, who was our metadata goddess, and sometimes Laura Blanchard, who was the executive director of PAC School, but this was sort of a passion project for her. And so we meet quarterly, and we still have a little bit of money from PAC School that enables us to pay our site manager, our tech guy, and we've agreed to go on for a couple more years. So, and then we'll think about whether we want to sunset or whether we want to go for another grant or how that's going to work. One of the sustainability issues that sustains me is that even if the site goes away, Temple is crawling it, so it'll be captured in the Internet Archive. And all the institutions will still have all the documents digitized and up in their content management systems. So it'll be a little harder to find it, but it'll still be there. Really notable collections. It's like asking a mother which child is her favorite. I think the thing I regret the most is that we were working with small institutions like the Atlantic City Historical Association, and a couple other ones that they were not able to sustain staffing or sustain communication with us during COVID, and we just ran out of time. So we were really hoping to expose some of that content that didn't, those institutions really don't have the resources to digitize and expose. So that's a sort of a, I'm sure we could just have gone on forever, Jack, but I guess I'll, we actually had leftover money from the last grant because we couldn't make it work with some of the institutions.
Okay, thanks. I know all about small institutions without money.
I know you do.
If there are any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. And then mute yourself afterwards. There are no questions here. There's something.
I will, I guess I just wanted to ask, it was a really interesting array of personalities. And I don't know if you have this information, or somebody maybe on the call does, like Lucretia Mott, when she was doing all of that, you know, her diary, did she live in Montgomery County at the time, or elsewhere?
I would have to look that up. That's one of the challenges of the project. There's so much content that I don't.
Yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
like picking a needle in a haystack. But I
Yeah.
just, you know, we know there's Lamont, and I think that is named.
Yeah, and she
Mhm.
often visited Robert Purvis in Byberry, and was good friends with his wife Hattie Purvis, the daughter of James Fortin. I'm guessing Hattie's in the collection there somewhere, right? I would assume.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
a lot of the Fortin women. So yeah, I think that's one of the misleading things about the project, is that we digitized material that was in Philadelphia repositories, but that material documented women who worked both nationally and internationally as well. So it includes Presbyterian missionaries, for example, who were working in foreign countries. So I'm not sure where Lucretia was when she was, what her home base was, let me put it that way.
Oh, and the other question I had is, like, with the content that's on the website, like how much of that is the website, like the In Her Own Right website, and how much of it is just being drawn from the repository that owns the collection? Is there like a lot of infrastructure to the In Her Own Right website?
Yeah, so the exhibits, the biographical sketches, the blog posts, the essays, that's purely on the site. So if the site goes away, as I said, you would probably only be able to find that on Internet Archive. But but all the search engine that sends you out to the full content that's at other repositories, that would go away too. But all the content would still be available somewhere on the internet in somebody's content management system. That was one of our requirements, that it continue to be accessible.
Right. And that's a great feature, because if you have the metadata in too many places, then it has to be updated in all different places.
Yes, and one of the things I don't like about aggregators is I think it confuses people sometimes, because they might think they've found two separate documents when it's really the same one. Right. One's on the site of the institution, and the other is aggregated and sends you back to the site of the institution. So.
Right. And I'm just putting the link in the chat in case people want to click on it and not have to type it in.
Oh, whatever.
I was fascinated by the friendship books. Could you talk a little bit more about them, and
Sure. Well, Janine and I just went to a really fascinating presentation last month about friendship albums in Europe, dating back to the 30 Years' War. So this was a long-held practice where it's like a autograph book, but on steroids. So the person who was starting the book would give it to a friend and say, write a poem, write a message, do an illustration, give it back to me, and then I'll pass it on to another one of my friends who will do the same thing. And so that's what this was. They were passed around among this particular community of friends and families in the Northeast. And the women in this case would do those beautiful illustrations and write poetry and messages to the owner of the book. The ones we saw from the 30 Years' War were all very men on horses with swords. And these are much more beautiful, but it's a long tradition of, I don't know, you're probably maybe of the generation where people still did autograph books sometimes, but these are just more elaborate autograph books.
And you said that you have digitized 4 of them.
Yep.
I mean, do you know, are there a lot more, or do people have them in their family? They keep them that way? Yeah.
Yeah, we think there's at least one more from this group that's out there. And then this is particularly notable because it's African American, free Black. But there are a lot of other ones scattered in archives around the country too. Yeah, it would be fun to track a lot of those down, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Bernice, are you?
You can unmute yourself.
A bit of trivia, Rebecca Gratz trivia, and probably you all know this, and I've already forgotten the name of what I was going to say. But apparently Rebecca Gratz, who you mentioned previously, was a very beautiful woman. And Sir Walter Scott based, what is it? Oh God, I forgot the name. Ivanhoe, or whatever, one of his novels, the female lead in the novel on Rebecca Gratz.
She was indeed beautiful.
And it's apparently that, I don't know how true it is, but I think I may have goofed up the story right now, but I think Sir Walter Scott, whatever, just drop it. Use him.
Oh, it's thought we.
So you're at a point where you're continuing on, even though you're kind of past your mandate. Are you, if you find new stuff, are you still getting it digitized, or are you just kind of maintaining what you have?
We're encouraging institutions as they digitize more content to let us know so that we can crawl their sites and add it to the aggregator. It's we're willing to put in the volunteer time to make that happen. And we did it work. So I think Drexel is adding more. We did work with the TRICO, the 3 colleges. They totally changed their system, so we had to totally reharvest their content. So the maintenance is a little more than you might think. But yeah, we'd love to continue to add material. Thank you, Janine. It is indeed Rebecca and Ivanhoe.
There's a question from Brittany Palma. This is Alex Palma. Hi, Alex.
Yeah, hi, Alex.
I have always loved this in her own right. I'm curious about what kind of funding would be needed to sustain the project going forward after the funding ends. It would be great to keep it strong.
So Paxcal is committed to about $3,000 a year, and that's enough for us to pay our site manager, our tech guy, and the rest of us are all doing it on volunteer time. And Paxcal's willing to keep, and that also pays for some of the web costs and that kind of stuff. So they are committed to helping us do that for another couple of years, and then we'll have to see. So
right,
I
and
keep
Paxcal,
saying,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I keep saying we need to write more grants, but that can really wear you out. So sorry,
Right.
Janine.
No, I was just gonna say, with, you know, all kinds of projects with Pack School, you know, that the thing is that the organization is in it for the long haul, but they realize that possibly not all of the web content that is created is going to be, you know, relevant forever. And, you know, it may be, you know, just take a different form. There may be new tools that become available to aggregate things in a more, you know, in a more efficient way, or a more accessible way. So nothing lasts forever, but
No, but we're going to cling to it for as long as possible.
yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm trying to speak from this.
That's better.
I don't think it's coming through, however.
We can hear
Fine,
you.
and you're not echoing.
Maybe he can't hear us.
Oh, that's
Uh,
right.
Yeah, right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can. Okay, good. I'm trying different equipment tonight. Always something new. Thank everybody for coming to the Zoom show. A couple of people showed up here, 2 Steves. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think I don't think there's anything
No,
else.
Bernice Kaplan, if you could unmute yourself.
I-
In the upper corner.
I just wanted to say it was an excellent presentation and I learned immense amount of information. It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Yes.
coming.
Okay, one of the
Thank you,
Steves,
Margery.
one of the Steves has a question.
Yes, this is Steve. The Pennsylvania Society for the, is it not the prevention of cruelty, but for protect children from cruelty. Are they still, what organization is taking over their,
Yeah, they've changed their name many times. They are now Turning Points for Children, but they do continue to operate.
Okay,
I'm going to put in a plug for next month, April 2nd. I will be doing a presentation on libraries in the Northeast, Free Library of Philadelphia locations in Northeast Philadelphia, with pictures and fun
good.
facts.
And then following up on that, May, Jack McCarthy will speak on the Poquessing Trail project that he's been working on. And in June, as we are wont to do, we're going to go to another site, a historic site. And in this case, it's going to be Trinity Oxford Church, a little bit younger than Pennypack Baptist and Byberry Meeting, but not much. They have a wonderful graveyard there too. So we'll be meeting there in June at 6:30. But we've got a couple of meetings before that, and I hope we've got good weather here on out. We've had enough bad weather. Anything else, Margery?
No, just except to say thank you so much for everybody attending and for your good questions.
Okay, we'll wrap it up. This will be recorded. It is being recorded, and it'll be up on our YouTube channel, the Northeast Philadelphia History Network YouTube channel. And there are quite a few recordings up there by now. So we will see you next month, hopefully here and there. Good night.
Thank
Hopefully.
you.
Thanks so
Good
much,
night,
Margery.
everyone. Thanks, Margery.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.